Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
In 2004, it was the holidays. I was going to visit my dad and my stepmom in Ann Arbor, Michigan. My wife and my kids, we kind of had this practice, if you will, of stopping at her grandmother's on Christmas Eve and spending the day there, which was a longtime tradition of theirs and kind of a promise I made to her grandmother when we were getting married that we would do Christmas Eve at her house. But at any rate, we would go there, and then my dad and my stepmom were living in Ann Arbor, Michigan. My wife's grandmother and wife, they're originally from Toledo. So it's like 45 minutes. It really worked out well. So we would leave her grandmother's and go to Ann Arbor. None of that's here nor there, giving too much information. But at any rate, my stepmom, Marilyn, gave me an article. The title of the article was, it was in the MIT Sloan Management Review, What Creates Energy in Organizations? My stepmom worked for Pfizer, and so someone handed her that article, and she passed it on to me, knowing that I run an organization. That's what AmSpirit Business Connections is. It's a business, but it's an organization. It's a collection of groups, entrepreneurs, sales reps, and professional chapters all around the country. It's an organization. We need energy. So I was very interested in the article. And I read the article, and it's something I'll probably talk about in a future live. But I noticed that one of the authors, Dr. Wayne Baker, he was one of the co-authors. There was Rob Cross and Andrew Parker were other authors. Dr. Wayne Baker was at the University of Michigan, which is in Ann Arbor. For those who don't know, I live in Columbus, Ohio. I attended Ohio State for law school, but I grew up in Michigan and really have always been a Michigan fan and continue to be a Michigan fan. So I was certainly intrigued by this. I'm reading this article that's very interesting, very enlightening as to how to create energy in organization. And the person's literally somewhere, within 10 miles of where I'm at right now. So I was very intrigued, got online, started looking into Dr. Wayne Baker, and he's got a number of books out there, Achieving Success Through Social Capital, Tapping the Hidden Resources in Your Personal and Business Networks. And very good book. And I mean, these are books with bibliographies, right? I mean, you kind of go through we call them notes in the end, where you can go through and you can see the other studies out there. And that has just led to a treasure trove of other things for me to look into. And that one article led me to Dr. Baker's work, and really kind of looking into all the things that were out there, and was kind of the launching point for me to really start to look at networking as not this tactical strategic thing we did at networking events, but really it was much broader and much bigger. And there were a lot more practical applications coming from the social sciences. Dr. Baker also has a book out there called Networking Smart, How to Build Relationships for Personal and Organizational Success. He's got a couple others, but I think it was 2019. I had connected to Dr. Baker's wife, Cheryl Baker, on LinkedIn, and we were just messaging back and forth. And I just said, I've never met Dr. Baker in person, but certainly not at that point. I hadn't met him or Cheryl, but we were going back and forth. And I said, I really appreciate Wayne's work, and it's really been an inspiration for me. And she said, he's got another book coming out. I'm like, oh, no, I didn't. And so she shared information with me, and Dr. Baker Wayne Baker was on my podcast, and I've referred him to lots of other podcasts because I think he's got a lot of wonderful things to say in this arena. You ought to pick these books up if you have the opportunity. But his new book was was going to be, and now is, all you have to do is ask. How to master the most important skill for success. And I won't get too much into the book. There's one point in the book that I really want to hyper focus on today. Um, but he does a great job of making a case for asking. And there's a whole history as to how the book came about and how they really got into looking at asking and why people ask and so on and so forth. But there was a what I want to talk about today is how we ask, because it's not a surprise to anybody that the best way to get things from your network, referrals, introductions, information, opportunities, is that you need to ask for those sorts of things. But what you might not know is that the willingness of your network to help you really depends upon how you ask. And believe it or not, there's research that gets into this. So there are really two types of ways to ask, and this again comes from the book All You Have to Do Is Ask. And they reference, and there was a short little, it was just a short, it wasn't a whole chapter, it was a short little commentary about ways of asking and how to ask and what to ask for. And it led to a study that was done out of Tel Aviv University in Israel. Go Pioneers! I don't know why I looked that up, but their mascot is the Pioneers. I don't know. It's just one of those anal things that Frank Hagan does. Stick with me. More to come. But the title of it was in the Personality and Social Psychology Bulletin. Um, and the title was, I Seek Autonomy, We Rely on Each Other, self-construal and regulatory focus as determinant of autonomy and dependent-oriented help-seeking behavior. It's quite a mouthful, isn't it? But more or less what it talks about in the study is that there really are two ways to ask, or two things to ask for, two types of asks. One is what we'll call an autonomous ask, and the other is a dependency-oriented ask. Autonomy-oriented ask and a dependency-oriented ask. And one is more effective in getting help than the other. And so the best way I can describe these two types of help-seeking behaviors, if you will, these asks, is just simply in this, I guess, biblical parable. You give somebody a fish and they'll eat for a day. You teach somebody to fish and they'll eat for a lifetime. And so the example of a dependency oriented help seeking behavior is, give me a fish. Give me a fish. I'm hungry. Give me a fish. That's a dependent ask. And the autonomy oriented help seeking ask is, teach me to fish. Show me how to fish. Yeah, I know you could give me a fish, but I want to learn how to fish. And it's not surprising, or if you think about it, it's not surprising that the autonomous ask, the autonomy-oriented ask, is much more successful than the dependent ask. And it bears it out in the research. The researchers, talk about the types of things that they did, and I won't get into that. I mean, it's you heard the title. Much of the study that's released in Personality and Social Psychology Bulletin is academic speak. I'm here to translate. It's in English, but it's somewhat complicated. But nevertheless, they created studies where they put people in situations where they're being asked things that are dependent oriented or autonomy oriented, and people are tend to react differently depending upon those particular asks. And if you stop and create your own little experiment, if you will, you have a sample size of one. Somebody's coming to you and saying, hey, can you give me some money? I mean, outside of your kids, kids will ask for money. But if somebody's, hey, somebody just reaches out to you and says, listen, I need some money, or I need a client. How does that compare to somebody saying, hey, could you teach me how to make money? Could you teach me these things? Could you teach me how to find clients? You know, what are your reactions to those particular situations? I'm a sample size of one, and this is reflected in the research. I'm more likely to light up for that second opportunity, for that second, the autonomous ask. Somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, can you take the time to show me how?" I'm much more likely than somebody just saying, "Hey, this is what I need. Send me a client." And what I find is that people tend to get fixated on the dependent asks, if you will. Um, and I can feel my brain kind of shutting off when they ask. And I don't mean to be mean about it, but it's almost, when somebody says, "Hey, this is the kind of client, how can I help you?" Well, this is the kind of client I need, give me a fish. I can kind of feel my brain kind of shutting down because one, I don't necessarily have opportunities like that, or somebody saying, "Give me a job." I don't have I don't have a litany of companies that are hiring. I never do. Somebody comes to me and say, "We're looking to fill this position." I'm going to try and send somebody to them in a hurry. Um, and be done with it, or somebody has some sort of opportunity. I'm trying to connect opportunities as quickly as I can. I don't have this inventory. I joke about it. I don't have a Greyhound bus driving around Columbus, Ohio with opportunities for people. That's not what I'm about. People are like, "Well, you're really well networked." I am, but I'm more a good provider of information on networking and how to do it than the end result of networking. And those are two very different things. And I would imagine that there aren't a lot of people out there um, that have this um, like you might see in the movies where somebody's just in a moment's notice, "Yeah, go talk to Johnny and Johnny will hire you." I don't know that that's real. It's certainly not me. But my point is that I'm going to be more inclined to help somebody with things that are autonomously oriented in nature as opposed to being dependent oriented in nature. So if somebody's, saying, "Hey, refer me a client," um, I might not be able to do that. Financial advisors will come to me. I know so many financial advisors, and I don't mean to be petty about it, but why you? You know, or somebody will, I'm a search engine optimization person. We've just met, send me all your people. Well, I know lots of people who do that. Why would I send them to you? I can only hand a client out once. Information I can share over and over and over again, and I'm happy to do it. But I'm not necessarily happy just to pass out somebody's name. Um, just That's just how I operate, and I think most people are that way. So, I'm more inclined to, and so I guess what I want to get at is the ways that how you should be asking, things you should be asking for. Show me how, show me how you get networked. Show me how you do a call. Um, can you, connect me to people who, not necessarily clients, but people who you would be good people like you to talk to? Yeah, I certainly can. Just have a conversation and get acquainted. Certainly. What are some events that I should be looking at? What are some programs I should be looking at? The other day, I was participating in the networking hub, and somebody shared out a great group on Alignable, which is another social network that's out there. It's kind of a LinkedIn it's a lower end LinkedIn, if you will, for smaller businesses. Shared about a group that was in there. That to me, that was like, "Oh wow, that's great. The little bit of information is great." So somebody coming to me and saying, "Hey, what are some good groups out there? How do you participate in groups? How do you do these things? Would you be willing to review my commercial or how I pitch myself? Would you be willing to do these things?" I'm inclined to do those sorts of things. I'll lean into those things because those things tend to get passed on. You teach somebody and they become successful, and that continues on and that continues on. Just to hand somebody a client, it's kind of, that's it, you know? Um, and it's just not as energizing for me. And maybe I'm speaking for myself, but that's what the research says as well. So as you go about this week, stop and think about what you're asking for. Yeah, I know you need clients. I know you need money. We all do. I get it. I get it. You know, the mortgage company, your landlord, they're not gonna accept good information as payment on, you know, your loan or rent. I get it. But to get yourself to those points of finding wonderful clients, wonderful contacts or a job or whatever you're looking for, stop and think about what are all the component parts that can get you there. What are all the little steps along the way, the things you're doing, and those are the things you need to be asking people for, because they're more readily going to step forward and help you. They're gonna they don't want to give you a fish, but they'll be more than happy, excited about teaching you how to fish.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.